Hello and welcome to Soldier Creek Bison. My name is Jamin, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I've been talking about my plans for rotational grazing and what I'd like to do here with the buffalo. And today I'm actually going to kind of walk you through some of my logic on how I hope to ultimately accomplish this. You know, when you're on the ground and I'm kind of showing some video as I go through this, it may be hard to conceptualize, the big picture, and was hopeful today that you might enjoy this, and I know it's going to help me kind of plan this out and think through some of these things as we look to more intensively rotationally graze the buffalo. So what you're looking at here is, an old Google Earth image when this was a cattle ranch. It's probably 4 years old. I don't know why they don't update it as often, but they don't. There's definitely been some improvements to the land, and we'll kind of walk through that. So what you see here is just kind of a highlighted area of Soldier Creek itself. It's comprised of 260-acre paddocks with a center fence in the middle. So this is the center fence along the back. And then Soldier Creek is here, and that's kind of what the ranch is named after. So there's been a couple of improvements to the ranch, and we'll kind of walk through those. The first is there was an old pond here, and this pond was dry. Basically, they had dug out the dam. I don't know if it had a leak or what have you, but we redid it. Now it's a fully functioning pond, nice and healthy, does the trick for us. Next is another pond we built in the back, and you've seen this in some of the videos. This is probably our largest pond, and it was built in a ravine here, sloping from east to west on the back side of the property. So this leaves us 6 ponds for the property. And at first glance, it might seem like enough, but quite honestly, where they're positioned, it's not necessarily ideal. For this to work, I feel like I need 2 more additional ponds. I'm going to kind of show you here. The first one is here, and the second one will be down here. And positionally, they're probably not the best, but where the land slopes, these are perfect places to build ponds. They're going to catch a lot of water. So it's kind of where I'm forced to build these ponds. This would be another great place for a pond as well. As it kind of the land starts to slope from here all the way down and kind of feeds this pond here. But I figure for now that will do the trick. So let's take a look at the front 160 and the approach I'm going to take. So one of the first things I'm going to do is need to put in some hedge posts. I will concrete those into the ground. That's the only thing I'm going to concrete into the ground, and I use that as kind of a location to kind of secure electric gates. So you'll start to see what the plan is here. Obviously, I've got my fence around the homestead along with the corrals. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do, those are the gates that take you in and out of the property itself. One of the first things I'm going to do is put up semi-permanent aluminum aircraft cable at 20 and 32 inches high. And that will run the length of the property north to south, and will also go east to west. And so what this essentially does is this kind of breaks up the property into 4 separate 40-acre paddocks, all with their own water supply. Now, in order for this to continually to work, or to be able to get to the future state that I would like to be, I then need to kind of divide up the ponds if I can. So I do that by putting semi-permanent fencing on the ponds and the pond dams themselves. And this is done, to give me additional flexibility as it relates to paddock design, but more importantly, it keeps the buffalo off the backside of the pond, which is going to be crucial for the long-term health of the ponds. I've been going, 2 years now, and they haven't destroyed them. They're okay. They're going to be fine, but I prefer just to keep them off of them and only give them access when warranted. So anything in yellow is semi-permanent fencing. It's that aluminum aircraft cable that I talked about, and it will stay up year-round. Now, anything you see in purple is going to be temporary polywire. And here's the first run that we're going to make. And this kind of splits the paddock into two 20-acre paddocks. Now, keep in mind as I show you the different paddock designs throughout the course of this demonstration, that's ideal future state. When I first run the animals through this, I'm not going to confine them as tight as some of these things, some of these paddocks show you here in this presentation. And that's because I really want them to slowly understand their boundaries. I don't want them to feel confined. I want them to have some space to roam and become acclimated to the system, as well as the cadence of me coming out every 2 to 3 days to move them. So keeping that in mind, just say, for example, the buffalo were well trained to this, everything was going smoothly, no adjustments needed to be made. What I could do is split this paddock. I could split this paddock roughly into two 10-acre paddocks, and the buffalo come in. And so now they've got access to this 10 acres. They've got access to the water here. They're here for 2 days, and then it's time to move them. So I set up another hot wire. Open up this electric gate here. They run through. I shut it, and now they've got another 10 acres and access to water. Now I want to move them again. I open up this fence a little bit, call them through. They run through. I then move that fence over to here. Now they have access to the water and, another roughly 10 acres. It's probably more than that, but now they have access to that. Now it's time to move them over here. I move that temporary hot wire. Now they're in, access to grass, access to fresh water. Now, I'll warn you in advance, this pattern is going to somewhat continue throughout the course of this presentation, so bear with me. We're going to do the same thing on the southeast side of this. Buffalo will come in, access to water, time to move again. Now they're over here. Now what I'm going to do down here is along this line here that you see roughly, and then southwards. This is all kind of fescue grass along the fence line. I'm going to keep them off of that. I'm probably going to run a temporary hot wire down here and only give them access to this when grazing conditions are right. A lot of this grass that you see throughout here is big blue stem, little blue stem, and a variety of other grasses that I can't seem to recall. But that's our big thing, is little blue stem and big blue stem are the predominant grasses out here, and those are warm season grasses. And the buffalo will absolutely eat them, but they prefer fescue if they can get their hands on it. So the goal is to kind of keep them off of that and give that time to heal, especially during the summer months. So let's say we move them again. Now they're into this paddock, still have access to water, and still plenty of room to roam. Now, how we handle the next paddock move is a little bit different. I really want to keep them off the backside of these pond dams. A lot of this is fescue that you see here. So what I'll do is I can kind of bring them in here. They still have access to water, but they don't have access to the rest of this. They really love this area right here. I mean, if they could, they'd spend every day of the week here. But we have to limit that. We're trying to mimic what they would normally do in nature, and in nature they wouldn't stay in one place. They would be continually moving, which gives the land time to rest. So let's say I did want to bring them down into here. I could just open up this temporary fence, let them down in. They're in for half a day. I move them out, and they're back into the main paddock. Now, as we move eastward, the same theory applies. Kind of split the paddock, cordon off the backside of the dam. They can't get to it. If I want to let them in for half a day, if even that. Do a little bit of grazing, and they're out. So now it's time to move to the last paddock, the northwest paddock. And here we'll set up a run where they can kind of run through in. We obviously have electric gates here, and we'll have one here. So all this is cordoned off. They will not be able just to run into here. But it's presumed that I'll have some kind of electric gate here that I can take down as needed. So they're in here. Kind of move them once again. Probably should have set this fence up first, otherwise it kept running, but imagine this is here. They have access to the water. And the last paddock move, they're in the final one, and they're here. Now, assuming, good grazing conditions, good precipitation, ideally they'd be 1 to 2 days, maybe sometimes 3 in any given paddock, which if we said, just for the sake of argument, we said 2 days per paddock, that should give us roughly 26 days. If you include these 2 paddocks down here, let's say half a day each, now we're at 27 days. So 27 grazing days from this front 160, which would be perfectly fine with me, because before they just had 80 acres to the right, 80 acres to the left. They would spend most of their time down here next to the barn and the ponds with us because, hey, that's where the water is. There was no available water supply back here. So while they would go back there for mineral and salt, which I would put as far away from the water as I could, they spent the vast majority of their time here. So I really want to try to get them in a position to be able to leverage the grass that's in this northwest paddock. So now moving on, if we're going to the back 160, now the front 160 was easy for me to initially comprehend and kind of put together a system to, for them to utilize. It's the back 160 that's a little tricky, and while I'm probably going to make some changes on the front ones, I'm probably definitely going to make some changes on the back one, but this is initially what I've come up with, and we're going to give it the old college try and see what happens. So imagine them going into the back 160. Apologize for the crappy animation. But this is the back 160. This red line indicates the permanent fence that runs along the back side of the property. It's not an accurate representation, but it kind of gets us in the ballpark. This is Soldier Creek itself, which runs pretty much year-round. Only in severe drought conditions does it ever stop flowing. There's still plenty of pockets of water, but it'll stop flowing if there's a severe drought. These are what I call wet season creeks. They'll run anytime it's raining or even several weeks after it's raining, because under a lot of this grass and prairie land, which is why it's not necessarily good for crops, is because there's a big rock base underneath it. So if we get a lot of heavy rain, that water percolates through the rocks, slowly seeps out the sides of the hills and then into these creeks. So even 2 weeks after a rain, you'll see water running through here. So what I'm going to try to do is, budget permitting, get a track hoe in here and dig a couple of little ponds along the way to help just capture additional water that I could potentially leverage in a rotational grazing system, especially over here. I mean, right here would be perfect for a pond one day if I could make a pond here, but time will tell. So if you remember in the front 160, I did semi-permanent fencing north to south and east to west. Well, here I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Obviously, I've got to fence the ponds. This is what I'm proposing on semi-permanent fencing for the ponds. And then I'm going to go north to south. This is accurate in the sense that there is some woods here. I'm going to get someone in to kind of bulldoze this out, kind of clear it out, because if the buffalo are going to run through here, which you'll see in the animation later, I don't want them kind of running through the wood line to get to the next available paddock. But let's set up a temporary electric fence. We're going to do that here. And the buffalo are going to come in. There's an electric gate here so they can't cross. And this is fescue here. They really love to beat this area up here too. So if I wanted to, I could potentially look at allowing them into here, but you'll see for this demonstration purposes, I'm going to keep them off of it. Come into here. I fence this off. Open up fence. Here they come. Now they're in here. Their access to water is here. And here, assuming water is flowing. Move them into the next one. Now this is a much larger paddock, and there's no real easy way for me to kind of fence this off. I mean, I could potentially come from here and come down along the edge here, or even come through here and over. But that's maybe a longer run that I want to do and more complicated. So I'm just going to give them access to all of this and the wood line as well. So assuming it's time to move on, they'll come over here. This is once again just a tricky area. There's a nice ravine here. Man, this is great for deer. So the deer love to run through here, up and then over this fence, and they'll come this way as well. So they'll come down here, they'll run along this fence line. Because it is such a tall fence, there's only a handful of places they go under or over it. So great for wildlife back here. But I digress. Moving on. They'll probably spend 3 days here. Moving on, coming into the next paddock, maybe another 3 days here. Access to water. Come in, maybe a day or two here. And then lastly, I fenced this off, and I fenced this off in such a way, I talked about it in another video, but this is heavily trafficked by the buffalo. They love being around here. And when they're back here and they want to go to the front 160, they will usually camp out around here to let me know. So they'll spend time, they'll just sit here and wait, like, hey, open up this gate and let us in. So I really want to give this area to rest. You've been seeing me feed a lot of hay bales in this area. And that's because they have beaten it up so much with the fescue. I really just want to put a lot of organic material down, the manure, and then give it a chance to rest. So if I do let them on here, it will be for no more than a day or half a day. And then they'll move on. And now the cycle continues. So we had 27 days before. Another 6. That's 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. Well, let's just say we had 40 days for the sake of argument. So that gives me 40 days of rotational grazing, and they're not touching the same grass for another 40 days. So that gives the area plenty of time to rest, keeps the buffalo moving, which they love to do. And hopefully stops them from beating up those areas they love to trample, especially behind the dams and anything that's fescue. So, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm really just kind of talking this through with you. I'm trying to figure this out. Someone probably has a better idea to do this, but hey, half the fun of this stuff is just, sitting down with pen and paper, watching your animals, looking at your land and trying to figure out, okay, what's going to work, what's not going to work. And I'm not afraid to fail, but if I'm going to fail, I want to fail fast and then figure out how to move on to something that is going to work. So inevitably some of this will change. Would love to bring you along for the ride. Hope you enjoyed seeing this and getting some insights into some of the thinking that takes place when kind of managing your ranch and figuring out how you're going to manage your land and your animals and your water and your fencing. So thanks for tagging along. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk soon. Have a good day.